special. This is a very special presentation by an academic researcher who is doing exactly the kind of research that everybody wants. We want to fast, but we don't want to eat. We don't want to do much, but we want to have health. Dr. Sebastian Brandhurst is a faculty and a professor in this area of gerontology. He has been working on foods that mimic fasting. I hope that this is our first interaction and there will be many more to follow after this first interaction, because seniors have a very complex problem from layman perspective, Dr. Brandhurst. Number one, they can't eat much. They want to eat very little, yet they want to have all the benefits. Number two, this is the time, even though body can make many molecules that are useful for the good health, with age, it cannot make sufficient quantities. Number three, whatever they do, they have a concern for the weight gain. So taking all these factors into consideration, a few months back, I searched for someone who is working in this area where we can find good solutions. Here is Dr. Sebastian Brandhurst today to tell us about some of the, or all of the latest research and what we can do practically to maintain good weight, good health, and still eat well. Dr. Brandhurst, please start.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to start and share my screen, and I'll just walk you guys through sort of the idea that we have in the field of gerontology. So give me 2 seconds here. Okay. Oh, it says my screen sharing is paused. Give me 1 second, try that again. Did you allow me to share the screen? Because it says right now screen sharing is paused.
Yeah, I did made you as co-host. You should be able to.
Oh, okay. Can you see my screen now? Okay, so I think you can share
Yes,
my screen now.
we can see it. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the feedback. As mentioned, my name is Sebastian, and first name is perfectly fine. I like to keep things informal, so please interrupt me if you have any questions. And I work at the Longevity Institute at the University of Southern California. So I'm in California, and the school that I'm working at is actually one of the first schools nationwide that is exclusively focused on the studies of aging. And with that, want to give a brief outlook of what we do and then really delve in, because I'm a biologist, so a lot of the research that I do is really focused on the biology aspects of aging, that is excluding sort of the social components. So I personally don't do a lot of work related to sort of policies or the social work that we do here at the school. I'm really focused on the biology of aging, so understanding how the process of aging affect older people, but also what are the processes that drive this aging pathways in humans. And so why we focus on gerontology is really quite simple. For one, the population in the US and across the globe is getting increasingly older, so older than 65. So by 2040, more than 20% of all Americans will be over the age of 65. With that, we see a global demographic shift that highlights numerous challenges that go in hand with aging, but also really the opportunities of aging. So the one thing that I want to make clear right from the beginning is that even though we discuss a lot of the problems that come with aging, I'm fully aware, and I by no means don't want to paint a picture that all of aging is bad. For the sake of this talk, it's really focused only on the biology and what goes wrong and what drives aging, but it's excluding obviously the large opportunities that really come from an aging population. And therefore, for the sake of this talk, I want to outline how aging in our field is really viewed as a catalyst of many of the chronic diseases that we see with aging. And there can be things like Alzheimer's disease and associated dementias, but also cancer and cardiovascular diseases and so on. And so, for the sake of this, we're essentially seeing across the lifespan in humans a sort of shift in biological function towards a system that begins to fail over time. And so, as I mentioned, we understand in the field of gerontology that aging really drives chronic disease. So you could see essentially all these major causes of death and disease that we see across the population are really driven by the aging itself. So a matter of time, but also a decay of a system. So a lot of these diseases here can be driven by a failing system in that a number of, for example, mutations over time really is what it takes to accumulate into cancer, or you have failures in sort of like your cellular maintenance, meaning your entire organ is usually very well maintained, and there's a number of mechanisms in each cell that really maintains a healthy cell, but that begins to fail over time, and all of that, this failure over time really drives these diseases. And so one part of what we focus on is how do we live a long and healthy life. And here's a couple of headlines. For example, National Geographic said a few years back, this baby will live to be 120 years old, or Time magazine stating this baby could live to be 142 years old. These are very extreme sort of predictions based on few outliers that we see. But there is examples of long-lived humans. One of them, for example, here is Kane Tanaka. She's a Japanese woman, and I will comment a little bit later again on the Japanese and specifically Okinawans. But so this lady here was celebrating her 119th birthday back in January, so she's probably now 120 years old. And when you look at sort of what she did, she really liked chocolates and carbonated drinks, and Coca-Cola company gave her a bottle for her birthday. So she's clearly an outlier with regards to maximum life, and her dietary patterns are really not supportive of living a long life. However, in her case, there's likely a huge genetic factor that helped her to live this long. Vice versa, this is on the left here. This is actually my boss. He's Italian, and he's visiting Salvatore Caruso. He's 108. And his motto to living very long was essentially no wine, no tobacco, no Venus. So he lived alone a lot. So another example, and then one of the most famous examples for human longevity is Jeanne Calment. She was a French woman. She lived to 122, and anecdotally, she smoked until she was about 100 years old. And she only stopped smoking because she was no longer able to actually light her own cigarettes, and she got tired of asking people for help. Again, in her case, she said her longevity is due to a large consumption of olive oil, red wine, and chocolate. And there's certainly some support there. We know that, for example, red wine contains a molecule called resveratrol that is associated with living longer and healthier, particularly in animal models. Well, one also has to say that the amounts of resveratrol that we need to consume in order to get these health effects, you would be unable to get that from wine. You would need to drink multiple liters every day. The side effects of that, especially alcoholism, would outweigh by far the amounts of benefits you would get from red wine. So we know that genes matter, but the problem is we can't change those. We technically can, but we won't. What other factors could we do to sort of modulate our lifestyle? And the simple answer is we know from a number of studies that the answer lies in this wheel here. So we know that diet and nutrition plays a huge factor. We know rest and relaxation matters, but also social connection, self-expression, intellect, and spirituality go together in hand with modulating how we age, and for sure exercise is another factor. So all I want you to take from this slide here is essentially 2 points. One, to a degree, the decisions that we make early in life affect how we age, right? So the point being here, you could be overweight, stressed, fatigued in your 20s already, and it puts you on a trajectory where the quality of your overall health sort of slowly decays over time. So you're in your 40s, you already have high blood sugar levels, high cholesterol, depression, and that only accelerates the older you get. And now we see this onset of aging-related diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure, poor memory, and impotence, leading to dementia, cancer, stroke. So we really, on this trajectory here, we spend a lot of time living with average health or even poor health. On the other hand, choosing sort of an optimized approach to aging would be already remaining active through your 20s and 40s, well into your 60s. And there's a number of examples where you can obviously see people that just remain active all their life. They're generally fit and active, and that really leads to them aging with optimal health until there's a point where the system again fails to keep up. But now what you see is this sort of faster induction of disease. But what that really means is you're spending less time with multiple diseases, multiple comorbidities. And so you're still active into the 80s. So you can see that these are completely separate ways of living in your 80s here by making choices throughout your lifetime. But we understand that you can't, you might not be wise enough in your 20s or 40s to realize that you need to change things in order to live a little healthier and longer. So for us, what we really do is try to understand how we can reverse from this less optimal health span back to a more optimized. And in our case, and for the sake of this talk, I will focus on diet and nutrition. But again, that does not mean that there's no importance coming from these other factors here. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of areas in the world that are associated with average and longer life expectancy, and these are called blue zones. And the blue zones are really interesting because they allow us to identify what people do right to live longer and healthier. Okay, so there is, by definition, there are 5 blue zones that are across the world. And the reason why there are blue zones is essentially when the researchers originally did work on these, they had a world map up on the wall, and they essentially just circled the areas that they were interested in. And once they were confirmed, they referred to them as blue zones. So that's really all there is. But you can see there's 5. So we have in the Mediterranean is Sardinia in Italy, and Ikaria in Greece. In the United States, in California, we have one that is Loma Linda. And out of all of these, I have to say Loma Linda is very interesting because it is a sort of very heterogeneous group of people. The lifespan expansion in Loma Linda is associated with people adhering to, or they're Seventh-day Adventists. So they have a number of religious guidelines that they follow that set them up for longer health span. The other one is in Nicoya in Costa Rica, and then lastly, Okinawa in Japan. And Okinawa in Japan is particularly interesting because here you have females that are over the age of 70 that are the most long-lived population in the world. In Sardinia, in Italy, here there's an island. You have the highest concentration of male centenarians. So a male centenarian means, or a centenarian is a person living over 100. Okay, so we find these there. For Sardinia, you can see it's not the entire island, but you can see this sort of a cluster of centenarians that is located on the east side of the island, in a sort of geographically isolated area. And you can trace it back that there's essentially a number of residents that are closely related to each other. So there's the genetic disruption is very limited. So there's almost a sort of inbreeding is too much of a word, but the marriages and the living together is stemming from a very few families that are at least 5,000 years old on this island. But so these residents are culturally isolated, and they maintain a very traditional lifestyle that involves hunting, fishing, harvesting the food that they eat, and they're fairly active. So there's a lot of people out there that would herd sheep, and you could follow them around, and there's really up into an old age these people walk. So the common denominators that we see from blue zones, and it goes back to the slide that I showed you a couple slides ago, is essentially when you look at exercise in this case here, they really move naturally. There's no indication that going to the gym and lifting weights for 3 hours excessively does you much good with regards to the blue zones, but it's rather just stay active. People walk, they avoid the cars. There's also a right outlook on life, so it's like identifying one's purpose, allowing time to downshift. In this case, can be anything like meditation, or in southern European countries, it could be something like a siesta where you just wind down. Eat wisely, so 80% rule, meaning in this case they eat roughly about 80% less calories than what you would find in Western countries. It's mostly plant-based. They allow themselves to wine, and then another big factor is connection with your people. So there's this belonging, having a close proximity to your family, and having a support system of friends. And for example, when we look at the women in Okinawa, when they grow up, they have about a cycle of about 5 or 6 close females that they grow up with, and they actually support each other throughout life. So even well into the old age, they get together in these small groups of just friends, and they spend their time together. So when you look at Okinawa, as I mentioned, Okinawa has the highest percentage of long-lived females. You can see here, based in Okinawa in the early 1940s, 1950s, well before there was a large influx of Western culture, you can see that these people living on Okinawa, so the small island compared to mainland Japan, on average ate less calories. They also consumed less total protein in grams. And when you look at sort of like their distribution and what they eat, one big factor of this dietary patterns that you see in Okinawa is based on the purple sweet potato that is found in Okinawa. It's fairly exclusive to Okinawa, and you see about 70% of the daily calories consumed in these Okinawans come from this potato, versus about 3% in mainland Japan. And what this does, this traditional dietary intake pattern, is really leads to a fairly remarkable increase in life expectancy. So you can see here comparing Okinawa versus the US. So for female population, the life expectancy at birth is about 86 years compared to 80 years in the US, and then a smaller increase in male, 77.6 years versus 75. But more importantly, I think with regards to considering how to optimize health is when you compare the Okinawans, it's the blue cohorts here, compared to mainland Japan and the United States, and you look at coronary cases of coronary heart disease, right? So the Okinawans do significantly better, even compared to the Japanese, and do by far better than the US in both male and female. Same is true when we look at cases of colon cancer. Again, Okinawans, male and female, do significantly better than mainland Japan and the US. Cases for prostate cancer, the same, breast cancer, and lymphomas. So it's really identifying that there are things based on dietary patterns, but also the overall social life that goes in hand with these blue zones that really can affect overall life expectancy, but also onset of many age-related diseases. And so the Sardinian diet, for example, is identified as a Mediterranean diet. And when you look here, there's really a large percentage of whole grains, dairy products, but these dairy products are local, so they consume low amounts of for example, sheep or goat milk, vegetables. Meat, fish, and poultry combined only make up 5%, and that meat is usually conserved for Sundays and special occasions. Very few sugars, added fat, and so on. So these are considered healthy diets, and there's an here we go. And sorry about that. And so this Mediterranean diet pattern is really associated with a reduction in all-cause mortality. So this is an analysis from a meta-analysis. So you take a lot of different studies and compare all the outcomes to really have a large data set and see whether or not you would expect benefits. And you can see here that adhering to the Mediterranean diet reduces your risk of dying from all-cause mortality, so any sort of disease, by about 8%. And when you look at cardiovascular disease, by about 10%. So there's a significant inverse association between adhering to this Mediterranean diet, total death, coronary heart disease, but also cancers. So just an example, for example, a clinical trial where they tested this is you assign a cohort of people essentially to 3 different groups. One is a control diet, and in this case, the only advice that was given to this group is to reduce the dietary fat consumption per day. And then you compare it to 2 different other groups. One was a Mediterranean diet that was supplemented with extra virgin olive oil. So this is what you see here, EVOO is extra virgin olive oil, or a group that had a higher consumption of mixed nuts. And you can see here when you look at the primary endpoints, with acute myocardial infarction, stroke, death from cardiovascular cause, so anything that's essentially cardiovascular disease, the rate of death in the control diet is significantly higher than people that adhered to the Mediterranean diet while consuming either nuts or extra virgin olive oil. And when you look at total mortality, you can see that this is in fact largely driven by people adhering to the Mediterranean diet and consuming this extra virgin olive oil. So really indicating that there is a number of health benefits that come from the Mediterranean diet. So the takeaway for this part, I guess, is as follows. So the diet should be mostly plant-based with high levels of complex carbohydrate, which comes from organic vegetables and healthy fats, and it can come from olive oil, nuts, salmon, could be some sort of coconut oil. Low to moderate consumption of starches, so they don't really eat a lot of pasta, bread, or rice. Occasional cycles of fasting, and we'll come to that, which can be beneficial. And then really you limit 2 meals or 1 snack per day for people who cannot maintain a healthy weight. Important to say is that you want to support high nourishment, so your omegas, your vitamins, your minerals, you could supplement them, and vice versa. There's actually good indication that until the age of about 65 to 70 years, you don't need to eat large amount of proteins. There's a little bit of a shift after the age 65, where higher protein intake seems to be beneficial with regards to lifespan, and that seems to be directly related to the fact that your body becomes less efficient in taking up proteins, and with that we sort of see the onset of frailty often leading to falls then leading to hospitalization, and from there you're sort of on a poor trajectory for overall lifespan. So increasing protein intake after the age of 65 might be beneficial, and you can actually do that with plant-based protein. So this was the previous section was sort of like highlighting what we know from long-lived populations, and now I want to give you a couple examples of more modern dietary approaches that are associated with health and longevity. So the most common one and the most studied approach is called caloric restriction. This has been done for almost a century now, and the idea is really to reduce your daily food consumption by about 15 to 40%. The importance here that you do that without malnutrition. So you want to still make sure that you consume your, that you take your vitamins, your minerals, your iron, and so on. And the idea here is that while you reduce food intake, this should also align with the night and day cycle. So this allows your body to consume food when you're actually digesting foods. So you're aligning your food intake with the hormones in your body that help you with digestion. We know that this approach increases lifespan in a number of model organisms, including primates and mice. A number of benefits with regards to health. It prevents obesity, diabetes, can reduce oxidative stress, it can reduce hypertension, the risk for cancer, and the risk for cardiovascular disease. However, the problem with this approach is that it's essentially a daily sort of intervention. So this would be a chronic approach. So you start this, and you wouldn't really be changing this. You want to keep doing it. And with that, there's usually compliance issues. So people don't tend to adhere to this too much. There's issues with regards to sort of your social life. You rarely go out and say, I'm going to eat only 60% of what everybody else is eating. So there's better ideas of what to do. One is called time-restricted feeding. In this case, again, the idea is to instead of reducing overall food intake, you reduce what you eat to a certain window throughout the day. And there's various degrees of what you can do in clinical trials, somewhere from 4 to 12 hours. Most data indicates that 8 to 10 hour window with regards to consuming your food is actually sufficient. And again, you want to make sure you align this to when you're actually metabolically active. So that's usually during the day. So the idea would be essentially to start, let's say you want to do a 2 hour time restricted feeding window. You would start at let's say 8 a.m., consume your breakfast, and then the last meal of your day should not be later than 6 o'clock, right? So that would be 10 hours at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So that would be a 10 hours. There is actually now a number of studies that come out that support an increase in life expectancy, and it helps defending against type 2 diabetes, liver diseases, high levels of cholesterol, and again, we see data now coming out that support effects on cancer and cardiovascular disease. A couple other approaches are sort of like skipping meals every other day. So you could be fasting on a Monday, but then resume food on Tuesday and so on. And again, here you alternate a fasting day with a non-fasting day. You can even extend the fasting day. So the variance of this called a 5-2, where you get 5 days of food consumption, 2 days of a fast, and this increases life expectancy in mice. This increases the protection against obesity, oxidative stress, cardiovascular disease, again, high blood pressure, neurodegenerative diseases, and diabetes. And then an approach that we have been working on here in our lab, it's called a fasting mimicking diet. The idea with this is to mimic food or to mimic fasting while allowing to consume food. Again, this is still a low calorie diet, but at least you get to eat something. And in this case, it's about 4 to 5 days per month. And then you just resume your normal food intake on the other days. Again, ideally, you want to align your food intake with the night-day cycle. We have shown an increase in life expectancy in mice, protection from cancer and diabetes, and improvement in risk factors that are associated with multiple age-related diseases. And so the reason why these approaches, so this sort of like fasting or limiting when you consume food and how much you've consumed and aligning it with your body's natural time of digestion is really vast. I'm not expecting you to understand all of these, but I think what I want you to understand is like we're looking sort of like at a cone-shaped figure here, and just by modulating our feeding and fasting time and what we eat, we can affect a number of systemic markers or signals that all of them by themselves affect a whole nother cascade of markers. And all of those are associated with basic cellular functions. So, right, it could be something like energy balance. How much do you eat affects how much energy you have. But that doesn't necessarily mean that eating a lot provides you a lot of energy. It's because it's affecting other factors such as inflammation, or how your body copes with stress or cellular growth. So by modulating this, you essentially affect the entire body. So unlike a very specific drug that might just target, for example, one of these molecules, food intake, when you eat and what you eat, has a broad systemic effect, and that's why it's really considered so extremely powerful. So want to talk a little bit about fasting. So obviously fasting is part of human evolution. Our bodies have evolved over time to be able to store energy. And we're in fact, as early hunter-gatherers, we're not eating food every day. We had small amount of food. We go through periods of starvation, but then we harvest an animal, or we find fruit or herbs or mushrooms. Then we consume food again. So we go through these periods. But then fasting is also the health benefits of fasting and mental health benefits associated with fasting really were recognized early, and you could find it across all major religions, right? So like in Christianity, Lent is a prime example where you withhold food and you don't have to eat. But then the problem is that fasting really was replaced in the past 50 to 60 years or so with a pattern of uninterrupted daily food intake. So now food is available in most countries, or in most Western countries for sure. At any given time, you can go and purchase food whenever you want to. And that sort of supports and food's convenient, right? So that supports that people just eat whenever they want to, and they're no longer aligning themselves with these patterns that are described early. And with that, we see an increase in obviously the obesity in the US. So you can see usually that tends to grow out of the Southeast, so like the southern states, Alabama, Louisiana. These patterns sort of seem to spread out, and you can see obesity increasing. This data is outdated, but it just shows the pattern. And with that, we see an increase in cardiovascular diseases, cancer. So today's food, when you look at it, it's traditionally high in a number of factors: protein, sugar, carbohydrates, and all of these activate signaling cascades within your body that essentially promote unhealthy aging. But what we know is fasting or a fasting mimicking diet-based approach, you now reduce protein, sugar, carbohydrates, turns off these pathways, and you can optimize aging. And the idea really is based on this slide here. And I'm not expecting you to understand all of it. I'll walk you through it slowly, and then we'll move on. But essentially, all I want you to understand is when you look across multiple organisms, and they get complexer as we go from left to right. So yeast cell, worms, flies, and mammals, you essentially have evolutionary conserved signaling pathways that just tell the cell whether or not building blocks for growth are there, right? So in yeast cells, there's this glucose and amino acids in the outside of the cell are sensed, they activate these pathways, and in turn that leads to these yeast cells to grow and divide and form multiple cells. And the same thing is true in worms, flies, and mammals, with the exception that the availability of nutrients is now sensed through hormones, which then in turn activate these pathways. And what we know is when you restrict food, the deactivation of these pathways, instead of now promoting cellular growth, when you deactivate these, it turns on within the cell a number of factors to protect the cell and allow the cell to age well without having to deal with a number of stressors. So we can exploit this, and we've shown this before. So for example, when you starve bacteria, yeast, or worms, it's counterintuitive, but they actually live longer. And the fact is, they do that because they upregulate a number of factors that help the cell to deal better with stress. So you can see here in white, these starved bacteria live significantly longer. Similar for yeast cells, you put them in water instead of a nutrient-dense medium, they live significantly longer. Same with worms here in red. These worms usually feed off bacteria. You starve them of the bacteria, and they live longer. Obviously, starvation in humans is fairly severe, so we can't do these extended periods. But there's a number of things we can take away from this. Another important factor to consider is that by deactivating these pathways, we can also promote growth. And so that's in we can promote, healthy aging. And in model organisms, we can do this by inducing mutations. So I'm going to show you some examples for this. Again, we're looking here at yeast. These are fruit flies, these are mice. And the left side is always the normal organisms. And then on the right, you see where mutations have been induced. So you can see by inducing mutations in these pathways, now these organisms are smaller, but they live longer, right? In fact, these mice here, they're the same age. And this mouse here holds, or not this specific one, but this mutant holds the record for the extension and longevity. So this mouse will live about 40 to 60% longer than the normal counterpart and will not die of diseases like cancer. So really remarkable. And then there's an example for this in humans, and this is called Laurent syndrome. So these subjects suffer or have a mutation that leads to this proportional form of dwarfism, and that's essentially the same as what you would see in these mice here. But we, in collaboration with Jaime Guevara, who's a collaborator in Ecuador, we did a number of studies, and we compared this cohort living with Laurent syndrome to their relatives. And the really remarkable thing is that when you look at their relatives, you have about 20% of them have cancer or died from cancer, 5% have diabetes, but you do not see this in population. So again, indicating that the modulation of these pro-aging signaling pathways can have an impact on the development of diseases, particularly cancer and diabetes. So let's see. Look, I have a couple more minutes, right? So I'm just going to briefly talk about the fasted mimicking diet, and then I'll leave you guys to questions. I'm sure you have a couple, and then we can discuss this. So we developed this fasted mimicking diet in our lab based on the idea that using dietary approaches, we can modulate these signaling pathways that I showed you on a few slides ago. And the idea really is that particularly protein intake is related to the activation of these pro-growth pathways. And so our idea was to develop a diet that is low in protein, but then has relatively good fats, moderate amount of carbohydrates. And you do this in small intervals that are low in calories, because that induces sort of like these general fasting-like effects. So that's why it's called fasting mimicking diet. And we've tested this in a number of trials that are directed against aging itself, but also multiple other chronic diseases. Here's an overview of some of them. We tested it in breast cancer, inflammatory bowel disease, and so on. So the idea really here is that when we tested this first in mice, we used middle-aged mice, and compared to this fasting mimicking diet compared to regular fasting has similar systemic effects. And when you look at this, we can see a number of factors that are upregulated. For example, the upregulation in motor system regeneration. So, for example, we know that during a fast, the liver weight shrinks quite dramatically. So during a fast in mice, liver uses about 30% or so of its mass. But with the FMD, you see that, but then you refeed, and so now the liver actually regrows within a number of days. And with that, you see an activation of cells, particular stem cells, that now drive this regeneration. We see a reduction in overall tumor incidence. We see a sort of rejuvenation of the immune system. We see in red here, this is the fat surrounding organs in mice. And you can see when you compare the two interventions, mice on the control diet have a fairly large fat deposit that is reduced in the fasting mimicking animals. And these obviously having these fat deposits is generally bad for your overall health. Now we see an increase in lifespan here. This is just how you would present this. So this is the population of mice on the control diet as they sort of age. They may get to about 35 months, and then you have this sort of increase here before animals start to die off, and then eventually in the end here they catch up. Again, so there's an indication similar to what I mentioned before in humans, that at an older age, nutritional requirements actually change. And just very briefly, and I can come back to that, I just want to say that we use this intervention in cancer management. So you can see here, for example, breast cancer and a melanoma. When you combine the fasting mimicking diet with chemotherapy treatment, either cyclophosphamide or doxorubicin, you significantly improve disease management and reduce cancer growth. We can use this approach to restore the beta cells in the kidney with regards to type 1 diabetes. We've used it for the treatment of multiple sclerosis, where here you can see, for example, sort of like the clinical scoring, meaning the severity of the multiple sclerosis is significantly reduced when you compare it to the control animals. And we use it for the management of bowel disease. And a part of this interesting study really showed that using this dietary approach allows the system to actually restructure the bacteria that live within your gut and help you digest. And lastly, as sort of like an indicative approach here, this is data from a clinical trial. And essentially we're looking at 131 patients. And all we do here is compare essentially how the tumor responds in these patients when they combine the FMD, the fasting mimicking diet, with their treatment plan. You can see here that on this rating, the people that were compliant with the FMD had a higher response rate. Miller pain, these 4 5s here is what you thrive for. We have a higher number, and when you look at the radiological response, you see that those subjects that were compliant with the FMD versus the non-compliant or the regular diet ones, you see a complete response or a partial response compared to a stable disease or even a progressive disease. So really, we see that combining this fasting mimicking diet approach with a clinical treatment plan improves treatment outcome. So I'll leave it at that. This is our collaborators, and then lastly, this is my last slide that I always put in. So please don't be shy and ask questions. I know I threw a lot at you. I tried to give you an idea over what the most supported data is when it comes to looking at overall longevity, but also a couple of more modern approaches. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have for that. I'll just I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. And this is really wonderful. Yes, it is packed with science, but the general points are excellent that we can use in everyday life, including myself.
Thank you.
Question, when we do fasting, if we do with good eating like a salad or fruits, that's better than completely fasting, right?
So yes and no. I think so. So salads, fruits, I think all of that should be should be your daily meal intake anyways. You will get a number of significant differences that come from the fast, and that is because during a actual sort of fast, when you don't consume food, your body begins to break down obviously fat deposits for energy, but also you begin to shift sort of let's put it the other way, your body begins to break down damaged cells. So usually you begin to utilize energy that is stored in cells, and traditionally your body begins to break down these damaged ones first. That is a process that's called autophagy. So it really means self-digestion. And that is actually a good thing, because these damaged cells are what accumulates over time and might lead, for example, to become a cancerous cell. So you want that. You do not get that by just eating a salad, but eating plant-based and generally healthy reduces your risk of developing these damaged cells to begin with.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I do eat fruits and salad every day.
Mm-hmm.
On fasting day, I don't eat anything carb. So that's what I meant, that is it better to eat that alone without carb?
Yeah, I think on fasting day, so important note on the side is that so the carbohydrates obviously have a function, right? So completely ignoring them is not good. But based on what I understand, is you say you only skip carbs when you have a fast day, and then other days you get your carbs from salads and fruits and so on. So I think that's fine. Yeah. I think the better approach, in my opinion, is sort of focusing solely on carbohydrates. I think you have a little bit more supportive data that protein, particularly like animal-based protein, is just not good. Like processed red meats are probably the one driver, the most prominent driver for many of the aging-related diseases. So I think I would probably suggest reducing protein intake.
Yeah, we don't eat meat at all.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but I figured that with this group, there's probably a lot of vegetarians here.
Cottage cheese, yogurt, fruits and vegetables. That's what I do when fasting.
Yeah. And then the only recommendation for that is try to do that in sort of like during the daylight hours, right? So similar to what I mentioned earlier, I would say do that, and then just don't eat very late.
Yeah.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
You know, there are a lot of these plant-based artificial meats, or whatever, however you want to call it, burgers and whatnot. They claim that they have high protein and whatnot, but it's artificial.
Right.
So I personally feel it's not healthy for us to eat that. But when you go to the sometimes to the doctors, they say you need protein at this age. So why don't you have a burger or a salmon burger, which is plant-based? What are your recommendations?
So First and foremost, I have not seen a single study that says that these diets, or sorry, that these like, was it Impossible Burger and all of these, that there's any indication that consuming them is equally good as a diverse plant-based diet. And you can get a lot of your protein needs from plants. So there's no need to say that you need to consume red meat in order to get that. The again, similar to what I mentioned before, is substituting or making sure that you have sort of like your iron, your mineral, and that these basic needs are covered, right? In some cases, like omegas or soya fish happens to be a great source of omegas, and if you need them, then you need to substitute it if you don't want to eat fish, right? So that's you can do that. I don't think that there's enough supportive data that's for somebody to say that eating it's called a fake meat is better than eating plant-based protein.
Yeah, and nowadays they're encouraging this keto diet. Every time you go to any of the stores, they keep talking about the keto diet.
Yeah.
But if we as vegetarians eat, as we did in India, 3 healthy meals with our lentils and our vegetables and all, I don't think we need all these other diets in our life. And Mediterranean diet is just as good as the Indian diet. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, so the Mediterranean diet just happens to be studied very well, right? It traditionally always had a large interest because I think I don't know if maybe leaning too far out of the window, but I think the mass appeal is just there. It's easier to sell to people that the Mediterranean diet is good because people feel like, oh, it's like good pasta and pizza, but that really is not the Mediterranean diet. The other point, you mentioned the ketogenic diet, right? And it's like I agree with you. So there's a big push. It's a very trendy diet, and it's particularly trendy because people see weight loss with it fairly fast. The problem is that when you look at, similar to what I showed you, for example, the people in Sardinia, Okinawa, there is just no support that that ketogenic diet is in the long term affecting health and longevity. It obviously induces health benefits by promoting weight loss. That doesn't mean that translates into something long lived. It's similar with like an Atkins diet or so. It's like you need to really distinguish between what are the short-term benefits of this, which weight loss by all means, and if it makes people feel more active and better for a short period of time, and maybe to even initiate further weight loss, maybe. But beyond that, there's no data that really supports that doing this for the long run is healthy.
Thank you so much for that explanation.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, Niranjana aunty, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I not understand. I not speak too much English. I speak to Hindi. He understand?
Yeah.
He can.
Yeah.
Geeta, you can translate.
Yeah, we can translate, Niranjana aunty ji, बताइए.
Yeah, मैं है ना फास्टिंग कर रही हूँ. अभी श्रावण महीना चल रहा है, तो 1 महीने के लिए एक टाइम खाती हूँ तो चलेगा कि फास्टिंग नहीं करना चाहिए?
She is asking, she is fasting for a month. She eats a single meal in a day. Is that okay for that age? That's what her question is.
Yes. I mean, I don't know how old she is, but I would guess the answer is yes. If she makes sure that there's sufficient protein intake. I mean, again, it can be plant-based. It's actually good if it's plant-based, and to make sure that she's making sure that she has sufficient minerals, vitamins, iron, and stuff.
Auntie ji, pata chala?
नहीं बा नहीं चला
सब प्रोटीन और न्यूट्रिएंट्स सब लोग एक ही मील खाते हैं तो उसमें ही कवर हो सकता है तो कर सकते हैं बोल रहे हैं
या
It
तो
has to-
मूंग
या हेल्दी
मूंग या
हेल्दी मील खाना चाहिए
या
एक जो
ओके
मील खाते हैं ना वो
या
पूरा
या
हेल्दी मील खाना चाहिए
ओके 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 थैंक यू सर थैंक यू वेरी मच
Of course.
यस यस
Thank you.
मधुवती
I have a question. I wanted to know in vegetarian, which are the vegetables and things which has most iron, because as we grow older, iron deficiency becomes more.
Yeah, a good question. I would need to look it up. I don't know it by heart.
We have a database called Poshak. The nutrients of probably 1,000 food items is listed, and we can demonstrate for each one of the nutrients what are the top 10, top 20, top 30, and you can choose what you want to eat if you are so precise about doing that. We can demonstrate that to you in another session.
Thank you so much. Yes.
थैंक यू
Great database.
Do you recommend at this age for us, even though we follow these diets, that we should take like the vitamins and things like that, or we just do not just eat a healthy diet and that's it?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, right? So there are things like omegas and they are just naturally rich in, for example, fish or so, right? So if you really you are vegetarian, you don't eat fish, then yeah, I would need to substitute those. But that's other than that, yes, a well-balanced and I would say also seasonal diet is providing you most of your sort of like supplements that you would need. You just need to identify where, based on your dietary choices, where are you low on certain things, right? It's just like, could be, yeah, it's like meat is a good source of iron, but you can get it from other sources, so you just need to substitute that. And so yeah, omegas is usually the one where I think vegetarians are a little short on it, but you can substitute that fairly easy. And there's good sources of like vegetable based omegas. It doesn't need to be all fish oil.
I
Thank
have a
you.
question. How often should you be fasting? I mean, is it like once a week or maybe once a month, or is it what's good for the body?
So yeah, there's a number of different approaches. Maybe if I skip back here, I'll show you a couple. Yeah, here. So there's a couple ones that are generally considered good. So the most common one nowadays that you would see is called intermittent fasting. So here the definition really is you alternate 24-hour fasting, which can be very low calories, or a complete water fast with a 24-hour, with the next day then essentially being eat your normal food intake. So that's number one. That's just intermittent. So you just essentially alternate. One day food, next day fast. One day food, next day fast. And there's a number of health benefits for that, and definitely weight loss is one of them. Another option is essentially this periodic fasting here, where you extend the fasting time. That's 1 to 2 days of fasting or low calories. And so you do 2 days of a fast and then 5 days of normal food intake. And again, you see there's a number of health benefits for that. What we are doing, which is a little bit more stringent, is we really do longer periods of fast. So for us, we do in humans 4 to 5 days of water only fasting. And then in our case, a lot of the studies that we have done were always focused on cancer treatment. So you would fast before you get your chemotherapy. And with that, we then shown that A, the efficacy of the drug is generally increased, and B, we see a number in side effects that come from chemotherapy, such as nausea and just feeling sick from the chemotherapy. So that's a more stringent approach, and that you would obviously only do maybe once a month, similar to what we recommend for the fasting mimicking diet, which is also 4 to 5 days. Again, you get some food in this case. You do that for 5 days, 4 to 5 days, and then the rest of the month you just eat normally. So once a month is probably the recommendation that I would do when it comes to sort of like a single long fast. Otherwise, all these other ones, these periodic and intermittent fasting, you could do throughout the week, every other week or so. So that's easy to do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What about that they are taking medicine for diabetes so that they lose weight, some kind of new, I think this is going on a lot. So what do you think, it's right?
So yeah, okay. So the problem with these dietary interventions is particularly these longer fasts, right? A lot of these benefits that come from this are associated also with the reduction in blood glucose. So if you are diabetic, or you have to take blood glucose regulating drugs, that is something where we like, before you do any fast, like make sure you talk to your doctors about this, because they need to know that, like your actual your MD knows your case the best, so they should always be informed whether or not you want to implement these approaches. A longer fast reduces your blood sugar quite fast. If you combine that with drugs or diabetes regulating drugs, you might run into side effects. So that's something where it's just like you need to. I can't make a recommendation on it. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a biologist, so you need to be careful with that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming to India Home and giving your precious time to our seniors. You're educating them, like you educated them so well, and you answered their questions so patiently. We appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming to India Home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was very educational to us. Thank you.
I appreciate all the positive feedback, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.